Hi, welcome to Modern Papist. I'm Ryan,
And I'm Sean.
and today we're going to talk about Christopher Columbus.
Yes, the all controversial Italian man himself.
How many statues do you think have been knocked down so far?
Oh, shoot. Okay, so I didn't have like an official list,
I know, I
but
know, I know.
but okay. So Minnesota State Capital, or St. Paul rather, which is a beautiful area. This is random side fact. When they were deciding where to put the state capital, they actually asked the people of the St. Paul area, would you rather have the Catholic Cathedral on the highest spot in the city or the state capital? They picked the Catholic Cathedral.
Oh,
And that's where the Basilica Cathedral slash National Shrine of St. Paul, I know it's a mouthful, but the Basilica of St. Paul is there to this day. One of the biggest Catholic churches in the world, actually. So,
oh,
side note, they
nice.
took,
Yeah, that's really nice.
yeah, yeah. So they took down that Columbus statue. I believe LA, Ann Arbor got theirs, Ann Arbor, Michigan got rid of theirs several years ago. But yeah, a
Yeah,
whole,
that's
whole bunch.
yeah.
What's it? One glory story, if you will, like a gloriously good story, is a town more central Massachusetts. Actually, the city council decided to keep the statue up, saying that that statue was originally dedicated to the Italian community, and that would be doing a great disservice to them to take down that statue.
Right, because then at that point it becomes the complete opposite of what they were fighting for.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right. So, I mean, not to mention, ever since I was a kid, which I a little bit older than you are, I'm 32. So there's growing up in Columbus, I had to be probably one of the last few that had what seemed to be a very neutral sense on Columbus. And then
Mm-hmm.
growing up, out of nowhere, it seemed like Columbus Day should be changed. Columbus Day should be, we shouldn't be honoring Columbus. And
Mm-hmm.
he supported this, that, and the other thing. And you know, it he's bad. And it's just, I don't really think that's the case. But I mean, we're going to talk about that, right? Like, we're going to go through where the criticisms are and why maybe taking what's his name again? I forget. What's the guy who criticized him? That was his political peer.
Francisco Bobadilla.
All right, so a lot of his criticisms were akin to maybe what, like Trump commenting on Hillary.
Yeah, absolutely. Just pick any two uh, big rivals in the political scene, and that's kind of the comparison. So, kind of having Hillary talk about Trump and us, basing everything we know on Trump from what Hillary said, or vice versa. It's just, it's just not fair. And you see that there's such a disparity between the sources of Francisco Bobadilla and other people that if there's somewhat of a consensus or his version was just slightly worse versions of what everyone else said, it might be believable, but that's just not the case at all. And we'll
Okay,
definitely
so
get into
there's
that.
like level differences. Like,
Absolutely. I mean, the basic stuff. He was born in 1451 in Genoa, Italy. Apparently, some people, there are some conspiracy theories that he was actually born somewhere else, but no, it was Genoa, Italy, as any Italian would have you know. And so the thing is, a lot of people know kind of the history of Columbus starts on when he started to set sail to America. But just a few things to know about him. He was not born in any particular wealth. For the beginning of his life, he was pretty illiterate and he didn't have particularly high prospects. But because he was a genius, he was a very smart man. The modern rhetoric right now is that not only was he evil, but he was also stupid. But that's just not true. No one sails to America with the technology they had at that time without being pretty intelligent and pretty
right.
learned. But he wasn't always that way. Eventually, he ended up marrying a woman of kind of royal status, a bit, kind of a German, one of the local small German Bundesländer principalities, and ended up moving to Portugal. And he did some sailing after his first son was born. He sailed to Africa. He sailed to Ireland. He sailed to Iceland. So that's where he got a lot of that experience, And those were like long voyages. You think that, Morocco isn't that far from Portugal. But even back then, it was anytime you went anywhere, it was a big deal. And then Iceland is actually a pretty good journey. Um, I know it's from flying from here to there. I know that's a good 8 hours. And then it's about 8 hours to fly from Iceland to Europe. So that's an 8 hour flight. So that must have been a pretty long. I don't know the exact flight to sailing conversion, if you will, but
Right.
I know it's definitely more. And that's how he got his experience. He ended up becoming quite broke because his first wife died, and he needed to give her a funeral that was in accordance with how royal she was, essentially. So it needed to be a very nice one, and that it just made him broke, straight up. And
Right.
so he spent a long time trying to convince the Portuguese monarchy to let him set sail. Now, if we know or remember the story, it was the Spanish crown that sent him out. So it didn't work. Portugal was sending all of its ships to Africa. It really did have kind of a chokehold on that route south. This is early expedition, and the Portuguese and Dutch are doing much better than we tend to remember. At one point, the Dutch and Portuguese empires were massive, and the Portuguese empire was not at its height yet because they have yet to find Brazil
Right.
because Columbus, but they're probably in what are the Angola, Mozambique. Those were the more Portuguese, and even today, even though they've moved back to their traditional languages, the more elderly people of Mozambique will still speak Portuguese.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and that was the reason why they wouldn't send him. They already kind of had a good market, and so he went to the Spanish crown. The Spanish crown was just kind of done. This is like not too long after the Reconquista, right? Where we kicked where the Spanish crown kicked the Muslim Moors out of Spain.
Yep.
So that was a thing. And so they're looking for that spice, they're looking for that gold, like any empire would. There's nothing wrong with wanting those things for your country. And Columbus, was able to meet with the king and queen, with Isabel and Ferdinand. He was apparently preparing his presentation for a long time. It took a long time for him to even get the meeting. He prepared for what was said 5 years,
Wow.
and they denied him. They didn't. They straight up denied him. It was someone else. One of the people of the court actually had to tell King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella to rethink because Christopher was almost on his way out. He was actually going to find a monarch to fund him. So after Spain rejected him, he thought this would just be the second rejection on a long road before.
Oh
But
wow.
they didn't give him much. They gave him kind of the bare minimum, 3 ships, not too many men, but it was enough. And so westward he went. Go west, young man, as the old American saying goes. And so he left. And so this is where things get controversial first. This is kind of the Christopher Columbus is stupid camp. They say, oh, he was dumb because he thought he would be there real soon. He thought, the world was a lot smaller than most experts would have claimed. But this is kind of not true because, okay, so you guys, if you watch the Bartolome de las Casas episode, notice that my Spanish is not good. My Italian is even worse. So sorry for the pronunciation of this name, but Toscanelli. Toscanelli was one of the geographers of the time. He made maps, and he was considered one of the best. And Columbus kind of followed what he said pretty closely. Was it correct? No, but it was one of the best they had at the time. Okay, so we set sail, and this is where a lot of his Catholicism shows, is at the beginning of this expedition as well. During the voyage, he made sure he had the youngest people on the crew, making sure they led people in prayers every half hour, the entire voyage. Every half hour, on the half hour, there was prayer.
Wow. That
Yes,
that I knew he was religious, but I didn't know like that's pretty intense.
that's pretty intense. He had particular devotion to Our Lady. And at the end of every day, the whole crew would make sure they say the Our Father, the Hail Mary, the Apostles' Creed, and what was the last one? Oh, gracious Virgin Mary that ever wasn't known, the Memorare, I believe. No, it was the Hail Holy Queen. Sorry, because of
Okay.
the Hail Holy Queen as well. And so, just pointing out his religiosity, how much of a devout man he was. And so he, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Ocean sailed the Columbus blue. Oh my gosh. But he went across the ocean and he landed in Hispaniola, which is now modern Cuba-ish, and he kind of bounced around those islands at the time. And he, oh my gosh, if you think my Spanish and Italian are bad, my native uh, West Indies language, I don't even know the name of the language, is even worse. So the tribe of the Taitos, that's how I'm going to go. That's the first
Okay.
tribe he encountered with. He met them, and everything was actually going well pretty first. It wasn't like instant war, but eventually they did end up destroying his first settlement. And the one thing is, what?
You know why?
It's really interesting. He doesn't write about it because I believe. No, I actually don't know the particular reason. I should have known, but.
Oh.
Well, I mean, obviously we kind of know because there was kind of a subjugation going on, which is a buzzword, but the technical definition of that in the context of Columbus was he wanted to make them citizens of the nation of Spain.
Right. Okay. So.
Yeah. And just conflict, not understanding, language differences. But the thing is that's really admirable is Columbus told all his men to hold back. No like execution happens, no, these stories you hear of tongue ripping out and throwing them in the fire, really weird stuff like that.
That comes
Which is
from his political rival.
that would be Francisco Bobadilla.
Yeah.
And so he tries to make an establishment, and then he goes back to Spain. In one of his writings, it's really interesting because at this time he's writing to them, and he's just describing what he sees. And he sees the Native American people, and he says, these particular, the Taitos, they're very calm people, and they would make great. And the word, this is the thing, is what the translation is, because it's translated into like many different words. So they would make great blank. One of the words pops up is servant. One of the good words that pops up is servants of God. And usually when it's quoted by Columbus's detractors, you can tell that it's the middle of the sentence. And if you look at the context, it's actually describing that they would make good A, Catholics, and B, subjects to the royal crown. Which,
Right.
remember, at this time, nationality and religion were so intertwined. If they were going to be Catholic, they'd be part of Spain. If they were going to be part of Spain, they'd be Catholic. So it's kind of the same.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's like another myth debunked. And so here's the big thing about Columbus. This is where everything goes bad and like his flaws show, right?
Okay.
Is that he was a great explorer. The actual fact of getting to America was so impressive. There's even no evidence to show that he was even using the best technology of his time. Like he was going on improper equipment for the 1400s, and yet he did it. He did it, and he did it well. Yeah.
Wasn't he really good at reading the stars?
Yes, from my understanding, yes.
Like that's a big thing. That didn't just go away like 2,000 years ago. And I think a lot of people assume that it did, or like 1,000 years ago it went away, but like we were still using Columbus was still using it. So.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so that was impressive, like his whole journey to America. He was not a very good colony administrator because when he showed up, he was essentially the government.
Yep.
And he was just not good at it. Straight up, he was not good. He didn't know how to, quell mutinies or how to organize the people, his people, them, and yet he's kind of blamed for that. And so he was actually arrested at one point, fun fact, for doing such a poor job, and that's an AKA not providing enough gold. And so he wrote in jail just his thoughts, and they're kind of summed up like this: They treat me as if I'm a diplomat going to Sicily or another place in which we're familiar. But that's not the case. I am in a group of new people with their own religion, their own language, and a total different way of life, for truly it is a new world that I am in, and I should be treated accordingly.
Right, like the difficulties are nowhere near what other people are used to because
Absolutely. And he was only in
civilization.
jail for 6 weeks, so it wasn't like a major thing.
Right.
So he went back. And the thing is, he admitted this himself. And that was one of the things that Casas kind of critiqued him on. He's like, you're not, or maybe not to his face or directly to him, but he said, like, hey, he's not the best at that. That's okay. And during one of his returns, because, he went back and forth a good few times, he actually showed up in a Franciscan habit as part of penance because he believed the troubles were due to his own personal pride.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like, what did he do? Like when he went there, though, like he just walk around with a
No,
robe.
he just went back to business as normal. But during one of his returns, and this is kind of how the encomienda system, we talked about this extensively in our last one. The encomienda system was kind of the secular governmental structure that really put the indigenous people to work and, made them till the soil for the crown and treated them so poorly. That system started because there was an uprising from the local mayor, another Francisco, so just to make it confusing, Francisco Roldan. And when Columbus returned, there was, kind of a give and take because Columbus had to appease him because he was essentially in control. And so he had to concede something. So he had to allow him being politically backed into a corner, had to make some concessions that were not entirely ethical, unfortunately. And it's really easy to look back and say, oh, well, I would have done this and that. But it's kind of the equivalent almost to having a gun pointed to your head. You really don't know what you would have done. At least that's the way I see it personally. And after this, his authority was usurped by another prominent Francisco Bobadilla, who ended up rising to power and wrote all those nasty things about our friend Cristoforo Colombo, if you want to use the original Italian.
So
that wasn't a joke, by the way. That's actually how it's pronounced in Italian.
No. I'm just trying to think. I'm kind of like grasping, kind of like putting a bunch of this stuff together.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm throwing in so many different things.
So it seems like in a lot of instances, what is attributed to Columbus should really just be attributed to someone else. But people don't know that someone else, so they just attribute it to Columbus.
Yeah, because I think that these people rightfully want to condemn a lot of the bad things that happened.
Right.
But Columbus just didn't do a lot of them. Going back to that, or I'm not sure if I even mentioned this, at one point there's a letter where he's writing and he's, telling the people back at home, hey, there are people who are taking these girls who are 10, 12, 13, 11 and selling them into sexual slavery, these new world sex slaves. And it's terrible. And people take that and, Christopher Columbus admitted it, that it happened and he's terrible. Once again, if you look at the context, he was condemning them. And the phrase he used to describe these people was, they do not deserve water, either in the sight of God or of man.
Okay.
And that's rough. Like, how harder do you have to condemn someone for doing something wrong?
Right.
And so Columbus is accused of having people's hands and noses cut off. That's nasty and weird. But when you look at it, who was having their hands and noses cut off? It was the Spanish human traffickers.
Right.
And after hearing that, some people would dare say that's not enough even. Now, I'm not going to give my political opinions on the death penalty, yada, 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 but have to understand he wasn't going around cutting off the noses of the natives willy-nilly. He was
Yeah, he
punishing
wasn't like
Spanish criminals.
yeah, he wasn't like walking around with his nose pointed down at everyone. It was these people were selling girls.
Yeah.
Very in things like even today we still find like you find out there's sex trafficking in America, and there is, and it needs to be addressed. Personally, I don't think it gets enough attention, but that's a real thing, and people hate it. I mean,
Mhm.
people don't stop at putting them in jail. They go all the way and say they should be killed.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, Columbus is kind of with you. like,
Yeah.
I mean, and he says so, and so to kind of use what he did in the time. I mean, like it's not like you can detain people in the prisons that we have today.
Oh, absolutely.
On
And
top of that, too, like there's just a whole infrastructure difference.
yeah, they're in an
Not
island in the middle of the new world. Like what else are you gonna do?
right, and so it's just kind of weird to apply modern day context to. You're removing the context of history.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely,
that's what you're
completely.
doing.
And these people, they just want to condemn bad things that happened in the past, but they just either willingly or unwillingly not willing to learn the context, and so they blame it on the one person that everyone knows. Instead of blaming it on others. You can get into Hernan Cortez. There's actually debate on that as well. But there's all these people that you can actually point to and say that is a villain, but they're historically insignificant compared to Columbus. So Columbus is so much of an easier target.
Well, so like when you actually bring in the fact, like, all right, well, this is the guy that set up that system, and this is the guy that set up that system. They actually are very significant.
Yeah, oh, they're significant, just not well known. I should have said that.
Well, no, well, right, but like that's the thing, though. It's like they just want to. I'm trying to think of another equivalent, another historical thing where I mean the closest thing I can think of is maybe Protestantism starting in 1517 with the 95 Theses. It's like
Hmm.
that's not actually when it happened. Like
Yeah,
Martin Luther was still very much a Catholic at that point.
yeah. That's the importance of historical context.
Yeah.
We don't teach that in American schools, of course not. About nuance, of course not. It all comes from an American Anglo perspective, and we don't learn even not only that we're only taught one perspective, but that we're
Yeah,
not
yeah,
taught that
that's
there
another
is
thing.
other perspectives.
And it's very and it's very cookie cutter. It's like it has to fit. And we have this, and even in some classes now, like you're taught Columbus is this raving lunatic that wanted to enslave people.
Mm-hmm.
Some classes, I'm not saying every class. There are, some, I used to be a trustee for a school board. So like I understand, like that's you need to pay attention to your history as well as other subjects, or else you're going to be teaching propaganda and not the truth as accurate as you can find it to be. Because that's what history ultimately is. You take into context everything, you appropriate, you add the nuance, and then if you don't, correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the one studying it, not me. But you put all these things together, and you're trying to approximate. Sorry, you're trying to approximate the truth with what you have.
Absolutely. What's it? One of my history professors, he starts every class he teaches with an analogy. Essentially, he points up at the wall and says, if the wall is all human history that's ever happened, and it's kind of like one of those spotted walls. It's got like little black and white marks all over it. He points out just any of them and says, that one dot is probably what we have recorded. And so for history, a lot of it is gathering what we have and not giving our best guess, because I don't like that postmodern historical framework of assuming everything we know or have recorded is wrong. Like we do have truth, but a lot of the details unfortunately are lost.
Yeah,
And
it's like the postmodern perspective, from my opinion, is well, if you can take it more than one way, then you can't take it.
yeah.
It's like, wait a minute, like you can't do that. Like there's clearly going to be evidence one way or the other, or a third way, because I mean, there's a lot of interpretations. I mean, when you start opening the box like that, it's one thing to be open-minded. It's another thing to have absolutely no foundation.
Yeah,
And I think they completely undermine themselves by taking the rug out from under them when they say something like that. So it's like context matters, and context typically converges. So
absolutely.
unless we just have a complete lack of data, where it's like just whatever.
Hmm. And
But
this is all important because it's, it's affecting us today. Not only the Columbus statues, but they're talking about a lot of places in America have already changed, particularly cities have changed Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. And that's big. I'm not sure if I mentioned this already in the show, but one big reason why Columbus is so celebrated was because at one point in the late 1800s, there was severe prejudice against Italians, um, largely because, they were kind of darker skin, different culture, but also they had this weird religion, right, where they celebrated the Mass in Latin still and had priests that could bless things and use, magic, spooky holy water. And so,
confession. Oh, how dare you confess to a priest?
exactly, I know, right? Imagine, right? And so, to help assimilate them to the culture, the American government really like pushed Columbus Day. It's like, hey, this is a hero of our country and always has been. Some people claim that we didn't start appreciating Columbus as a historical figure till 1829 when the first English biography of him was written. But by that point, we already had, the District of Columbia. So boom,
Yep.
we already had Columbus, Ohio. That's another one.
Yep.
The territory of Columbia, which was what is now Oregon and Washington, that kind of area, Cascadia. It was originally known as Columbia, but
Right.
then they changed it. They changed it so it wouldn't get mixed up with the District of Columbia. But then they ended up naming one of the states Washington, like Washington D.C. Anyways. So, and the nation of Columbia already existed under that name.
Yep.
So, to pretend that Columbia, or Columbus wasn't a big influence on America throughout its founding.
Yeah, like 300 years later, like whatever.
Yeah, yeah. But I do know he did have a sense of his divine purpose, and that's why when he got there, that's one thing I forgot to. Another one of his, good virtues I forgot to extol is he personally ended up baptizing a lot of the Native Americans. Evangelization was a goal for him, and if you do believe in the faith, I heard one person saying this trying to defend Columbus. If you hold the faith to be, true, then that is a great work of charity. I believe St. Thomas Aquinas said that's the greatest act of charity is to bring Christ to someone else. And then for me personally, what's it? My family's pretty recent immigrants. I don't know what we would have done if we didn't have an America to immigrate to. Honestly, we would have been lost.
Oh
Starving
yeah.
family, very stereotypical. If we don't leave this island, we're gonna die. I don't know where we would have went. So I'm personally grateful for Columbus and his daring journey, so I can be here. As much as I loved it, and I did live in Ireland for a bit, I'm very grateful to be living here.
Okay. Is there anything else you really want to talk about, or on record? I guess.
On record, no, just the usual ending, just the usual. Be nice to history, or history won't be nice to you. We are standing on the shoulders of giants, and we think we're flying. We were born on third base, but sometimes we think we hit a triple, it's so easy to criticize Columbus while you're enjoying all the benefits that Columbus has given you. He's not perfect, but neither are you. And he's done more for society than you or I will ever do. So that's just, I'm probably going to end every episode about like that, about a controversial figure, but it's true. And so definitely not perfect. Pray for his soul, even.
That's a very good point to do. Pray for his soul. Okay, all right. So I guess if you like this, like it, subscribe. If you have any recommendations, we've got a list, and that list isn't done.